There's a lot more of S.Gopalakrishnan that we are going to be seeing here in Delhi at least. He is the new president of CII and he's here to share his views on macroeconomy, what are the concerns that industry has, and has the government really got its act together. Thanks very much for joining us on this show. I'm personally happy because we're going to see a lot more of you in Delhi. I love your tie. I love your tie. It's got the card pack, and I'm going to have a question on that. But let me just first begin by talking about your new role. You're taking over at a time when the broad perception is that the government is trying to do things. The government is trying to get its act together. That's the perception. But even then, investment isn't picking up. So there is positive thinking, there's positive talking, but investment isn't breaking ground. Is my assessment correct in that situation?
So I would differ only in one point. I think the sentiment is starting to improve. I believe that when the government says that 6 to 6.5% growth is possible, CII also believes that 6 to 6.5% is achievable. Some signs are there. Some analysts have said that it is possible to achieve that. So there is a turnaround happening. Now we need to sustain this. That is the key. We need to sustain. Fortunately for us, the WPI numbers are good, commodity prices are going down. So we have to grab this opportunity and we have to see what can we do. So maybe an interest rate cut.
Very often they say fortune favors the brave, and I'm wondering if inflation has come down and if, we are seeing early signs of recovery with you as the head of CII. But I still have a question. From the time of being vice president a year back to taking over as the president, do you think New Delhi has got its act together? Do you think the government is now at least sensitive to the needs of the industry, realizes investment is at rock bottom and has to do things? Do you think that has changed?
Yes, clearly. If you look at all the things that have happened in the last 6 months, deferring of retrospective amendments, committees like the Rangachari committee being set up to look at the issues of the industry, the budget itself and the statements the finance minister has made, his trips abroad, meeting investors, discussing with them their concerns and how India will address those concerns. So every one of those things clearly say that yes, there is a realization, there is action happening. Even the Prime Minister talking about how he's going to look into infrastructure projects, how we're going to address the challenges faced by this, how he's going to look at through the CCI, look at clearing projects as much as possible. So all these things are signs clearly indicating that yes, there is a realization and we are moving back in the right direction.
You prompted me to my next question. You spoke about the CCI. It's a very well-intended move. The industry has welcomed it with open arms, but very few projects till now have really got the nod going ahead. A, because it's obviously multi-ministry in nature, many nods are required. It's a step in the right direction. But the risk that one runs, and that's what critics of this reform seem to have suggested, the risk that one runs is that it will perhaps remain just that, a very well-intended move, but one that is not really going to see a whole host of stalled infrastructure projects take off. Are you a contrarian on this?
No. My take on this is, if there is a well-intended move, how can we make this into a reality? Now, how can we create the climate of opinion? How can we discuss the difficult issues that are there, and how can we build a consensus? What process that we need to do? See, these are not things that are unique to India, right? Coal mining happens around the world.
That's right.
Now, how have they addressed some of these issues? What can we learn? What can we benefit from that? So, see, if this is a well-intended move, if it is a move in the right direction, how can we make the implementation better? How can we leverage this opportunity to make this happen? Now, there is a need to build a climate of opinion. That is also something which CII will also participate in and do. So, CII will also participate and interact with different political parties to get their views, understand their differences, address them. We will present our case for this. So these are processes that are required to make this happen.
Before I go on to the political dialogue that I think you as the leader of CII will now have to do a lot more, I want to speak about inflation. And like we began our chat saying that the good signs are here for everybody to see. Inflation is cooling off. There has been an uptick in IIP. Given that scenario, and you yourself believe that a 6 to 6.5% growth is perhaps achievable, what could be the challenges to the growth? And the second obvious question is, do you think it is time Governor Subbarao let's go of his very tight monetary policy stance and becomes a little more aggressive?
So CI has been advocating that over the next 12 months we should look at a 1% or 100 basis points cut in interest rates, and over the next 1 month look at 50 basis points cut of 0.5%. So clearly CI believes that this is needed to spur consumption, to spur consumer confidence, to look at sectors like auto sector which are affected and see a lot more action here, or a lot more manufacturing activity come back here. Now what could stall, and which was your first question,
right.
It is that we believe enough has been done. It's not enough. We need to sustain this. We need to make sure that we probably postpone some of the things like retrospective tax amendments and things.
We can't be complacent about action that has been taken.
Exactly. We need to sustain this, and we need to say that we have a long-term, stable policy framework in India. I think it's important not just for foreign direct investment, it is also important for domestic investment. Domestic industry must also invest in our country.
That's right. I think we're wooing the foreigners a tad too much and not really doing much for the domestic industry. But just to harp on the RBI point a little more, you say that from a CII point of view, from an industry point of view, largely a 1% rate cut is desirable over the next 1 year. But do you believe a 6 to 6.5% growth is going to be possible with just that 1% interest rate cut? Because I think the clamor is for a lot more. People want RBI to be more aggressive. The stance has been very protectionist. The stance has been to tame in inflation. We are perhaps going to see that happen. Is it not time that we should focus and spur growth?
So that is why we need to look at other things that we need to do. So there is a need to, as I said, give the long-term perspective on stable policy framework. We need to look at stalled infrastructure projects and how can we get them back on track? How can we spur activity on infrastructure side? The third element is ease of doing business. We are 132 out of 185 in the World Bank rankings. So what can we do to look at ease of doing business? This will actually impact small and medium enterprises. It will also impact startup activity. That's one of the projects I'm personally very keen about: innovation, entrepreneurship, etc. So there are multiple things that we need to do in order to make sure that 6 to 6.5% is happening this year, and maybe 8%, which we are shooting for next year.
8% is something that the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister have both spoken about in the same breath, I think, in the last 2 days. And now that you say it, there seems to be this optimism. But do you think that optimism is realistic? And is it going to be possible without an aggressive RBI stance?
So, that's why we are saying, 1% for RBI, right? So we are saying that, RBI also needs to, I wouldn't say aggressive, and RBI needs to look at very seriously a 1% cut. Now, being a leader requires you to be an optimist. You can't be a leader and be a pessimist, right? So that is the reason why, yes, there are challenges, right? But we need to say that these are challenges that can be overcome. There is a way forward. These are the steps. Some of it will work. Hopefully most of it will work, and we will achieve that growth.
I like speaking to optimistic people, and which is why it's a pleasure having this conversation with you. But you're also somebody who interacts with global markets because of the other hat that you wear, and that's Infosys. Just from that point of view, let me ask you this question. We may do a lot that we would want to in the domestic economy and in India, but unless Europe and US get back on their feet, can we really look at achieving higher growth targets? I mean, our exports, we are dependent on both these markets. We are dependent on them because for the inflows. Our CAD is yawning. Just a very simple question. Can we get our act together without US and Europe really being on their own feet?
So if you look at the period after 2007, when the world growth rate dramatically dropped off, India continued to grow at 8%.
That's right.
So clearly there is something unique about our specific environment, which is about 80% of our GDP comes from domestic consumption. Exports is only about 20%. So there is an opportunity for us to look at domestic consumption, savings within the country to be back invested into growth. So I think there is an opportunity. Yes, there will be some impact. We can't be completely insulated from what is happening, but that impact is limited. And when it comes to domestic, growth rate, we can depend on spurring consumption, spurring activity, within India, and part of the consumption is about investment in infrastructure projects. So all these things, if we act on, I strongly believe that it is possible for us to grow at to 6.6 to 6.5%, and we have demonstrated that after 2007.
A lot of that was also stimulus-led, but let me just turn focus and talk about the other good news that we started this discussion on, and you said it's commodity prices. Both crude and gold slipping means a smaller current account deficit. I'm sure policymakers in New Delhi are breathing easy, but do you believe this is going to be a sustained commodity correction that one will see? And is it time that we breathe easy just yet?
Not yet. See, if global growth rate picks up at some point of time, again you will see pressure on commodity prices going up, right? Maybe not gold, but some other, oil and things like that.
Right.
So definitely we have to also look at how can we secure our own future when it comes to commodities that are essential for us. So look at, for example, coal, right? We have the 5th largest deposit of coal.
Right.
Now, what can we do to get that coal out of the ground, meet the requirements of our power sector and things like that? So this is where again there is a need for dialogue, there is a need for consensus there, because coal can't be extracted without mining, right? Without digging.
That's
so
right.
How can
and you need nodes there.
So how can we do this, right? There will be some impact on the environment, but other countries have done that. What can we learn from that, and how can we make this happen? I think this is needed. Otherwise, we will be struggling.
One of the measures how the finance minister and his team wants to curtail CAD really is to attract more inflows and more stable form of inflows, which is really FDI, and which is why there's been a lot of dialogue in New Delhi to review FDI caps in the sector. A lot of sectoral caps have perhaps outlived their relevance. If you look at telecom, 74% is as good as 100%. From a industry point of view, which are the sectors that you think should be opened up for further FDI? And do we run the risk of perhaps inviting volatile capital, or do you think this is the need of the hour and should be done?
See, anything that requires long-term investment, anything that requires huge capital investment, I think we should look at, because that will be sticky investment. Right? Having said that, I also want to talk about the lesson for me personally, from the IT industry. In 1993, we allowed 100% investment in IT industry, IT services industry. The industry was minuscule at that point. It grew significantly, created 2.5 million jobs. It is competitive, it's world class, it's doing well, it's growing. Multinational corporations are investing in India, created significant number of jobs. So India can be competitive. Our professionals can do well in this industry, in all our industries. And I'm also, if I look at some of the other sectors, like let's say steel, for example, Indian companies have gone out and acquired outside India.
That's right.
Automobile, Indian companies gone outside and acquired India. So outside in India. So I believe that we can create a competitive industry. Yes, it can't be opened up suddenly, but if we do a planned, staged transition, we will create a world-class competitive industry in every sectors.
But do you believe there are sectors on your radar or on the industry's radar that perhaps can be opened up, say, sooner than the rest of the sectors? And which sectors would those be?
So, for example, electronics manufacturing, right? This is something where government already allows. So can we now spur investment? Because there is a need to reduce imports here. In this case, it's about imports, right? The projection is that $400 billion of electronic appliances and goods will be needed for growth of India, right? How can we reduce imports here? So these are the areas we should look at.
But let's talk about specific sectors. For instance, telecom is the discussion we started with. It has 74% FDI. Many people believe with 74% FDI you can do as much as you would have done with 100%. So there's a security angle, but people say that argument has outlived its relevance. Let's look at defense. I think there is a case for higher FDI. Let's look at banking and insurance. Many people are eyeing the Indian population. They want to come and invest here. Don't you think these are sectors that the government should just go ahead and open and review FDI caps? And do you also believe that the argument of security for some sectors like defense or like telecom is perhaps a little outdated?
No, security aspect must be considered, but it's not about foreign direct investment. It is about domestic content and making sure that we have the sufficient knowledge about the usage that we put to. That's very, very important that we have that knowledge, because we cannot be dependent on it's about knowing what goes inside and knowing how to operate this equipment and things like that. That is very, very important. So that is the key thing I would look at when it comes to security. Now, having said that, I think, I am for opening up sectors over a period of time. I am for looking at foreign direct investment into the country. And, I talked about the IT services industry itself.
Yes.
And this has to be done in a manner in which it's sustainable. See, the key thing again to look at is it sustainable, right? Certain sectors require huge investments. The gestation period is long. Returns come over a long period of time. So, for example, airline industry, right? So, you need to look at what is the right policy framework in which you can have a robust, dynamic airline industry, right? It's very, very important to think about. Similarly, in the telecom also, the key thing here to look at is, we created a very vibrant industry here. Now, it has gone into significant challenges now. What caused it? How did this happen? What are the lessons that we can learn? How do we prevent this from happening in the future? So that's what I would say is needed, because we need vibrant, dynamic industry going forward. That's very, very important.
Do you think the fact that some of these industries went through a troubled phase, and I think it's evolutionary in nature, do you think that is perhaps holding the government back from opening up FDI, because there's this challenge that they seem to envisage at this stage?
See, business cycles happen. It may happen sometimes in a significant manner across sectors, or sectors may go through cycles, right? So we shouldn't look at that. We should look at, is there a permanent damage to the industry, and then what can we do to prevent that? I think that's necessary, but cycles will always happen.
A very quick question then on something that the industry has been asking for a very long time, and that's opening up the banking space. The industry wants licenses for corporates. There are arguments on both sides. One side believes there should be an arm's length distance, there shouldn't be licenses given to corporates. The other side believes, they are independent entities, and why not? The world over, some countries practice it. Which side of the argument are you throwing your weight about?
So, there is a need to spread banking to all parts of the country. We need to get banking across all parts of the country, and there is a need to look at, is there a opportunity to give more licenses? Now, what should be the policy? I think it's a dialogue that needs to happen. Most important thing is it has to be transparent, it has to be a fair mechanism, and that is why we need to have a dialogue. CIIs, other industry associations must participate in the dialogue and create the right policy framework.
So should corporates be given banking licenses or not?
Yes, but under the right framework and policy.
As you wear the CII hat, you will be doing a lot of argument making on part of the industry. You will be telling the government, you will be selling arguments, you will be convincing them about your point of view, which in a sense is lobbying. And Indian IT companies also lobby overseas. Why is it that when a Walmart lobbies, we suddenly squirm up and say that, oh my God, this is a company that's done something wrong, has come into India? Do you think that fear or that psychosis we create is unwarranted?
Sometimes yes. We need to relook at our thought process around this, our ideas around this. Even if you can say advocacy, you can say lobbying, but definitely industry is key to growth of an economy. Industry is key to creating jobs. Industry has opinions. And we would like to, frame those and position those and discuss those opinions with other stakeholders in the economy, including government. And there has to be a platform created to do these things. It becomes negative when that platform is not available, or when that platform is available to limited number of people. That's when the challenge happens. But if there is a continuous dialogue, there is a platform created for the dialogue, that platform allows everybody to participate, then it's a positive way of doing things, and that's what we need to have.
Sure enough, and I'm presuming that you'll be doing a lot of that, but you also alluded to something early on, and you said you will be speaking to political parties to advocate your point of view. Given the fact that we are a year away from elections, do you think India runs the risk of policy being governed by politics? And is that something that you see as a challenge for yourself in the next 1 year?
But it's a reality every day. It's not something unique. Yes, it could slow down policy making. That is possible, and we are hoping that, yes, some of it is avoided, and we need, because of the situation that we are in today, there is continued momentum on growth and continued momentum on reforms.
Right.
But having said that, we know that we have to stay engaged. We know that we have to present our agenda, and we need to have a dialogue.
In the last 2 weeks, you've seen a Rahul Gandhi speak to India Inc. like never before, and I remember asking people questions after he spoke. We've seen Narendra Modi address many platforms across India. Both seem to be prime ministerial candidates. Whether they will be finally projected or not is something only politicians will know, and you and I will both not hazard a guess here. But looking at the two people and looking at the ideology and the arguments that they're trying to make, they're both talking about growth, they're both talking about inclusive growth and all of that. How do you think Indian politics is going to change contours in the next few months to a year? And how is industry really waking up to this?
So clearly, communication is very important. Leveraging platforms is very important. Getting the message across is very important. Having a message is very, very important, and you will see more of that. I think our politicians, including all forms of leadership, including business leadership, understands the need for communication, understands the need to leverage this new real-time online world in which we live today. It's 24/7 news and communication, right? So we have to learn to take advantage of these things. It's amazing that in one shot you can reach millions of people.
That's true.
You don't need actually TV to do that. You can actually go to YouTube,
social
load
media,
something,
yes,
social, and get it across actually. So we need to leverage all these things. And this is a new world in which we live. So that's what we will see more of happening this time, and it is going to be very interesting. The
new world is also about a poster boy of development, Narendra Modi, and a young hope in Congress, Rahul Gandhi. I'm sure the industry at one level is torn between the two. Are you?
So individuals will have to make their own choices. I know that they will make. I'm sure. But an industry body, we are neutral. We want to work with everybody. And as I said already, last 20 years have shown that whichever form of government, they support growth.
Sure enough. My last questions to you, and this is about a sector that you understand very well. I'm not going to ask you any specific questions on your company or on your industry, but IT industry is seeing tremors like never before. The slowdown has obviously hit the industry hard. How long before we actually see IT wake up and get its act together?
See, the scope for the industry is, in the medium to long term, I'm very optimistic about it. It's significant. Because the use of information technology will continue. It will continue to impact our lives over many years to come. Many of the things we talked about, social media, etc., is significantly changing our life and significantly changing the way we use technology today. So I am very optimistic that this industry will continue to grow, but it will evolve. It will include more players. When you book a ticket online or when you buy books online, these are all now leveraging IT and in some form or other part of the IT industry. So that is what I see happening, and that is why I'm optimistic about the growth, the job creation opportunities, and optimistic about the industry in the medium to long term. I
think I've already told you twice in this interaction that I love speaking to you because you're an optimistic person. I cannot let you go without asking you one question. Infosys delivered a stupendous quarter last time around. There's been a little bit of a panic button that investors have pressed this time. You are, of course, the co-founder and also the co-chairman of Infosys. How would you want to soothe and frayed nerves at this stage? There's a little bit of anxiety as far as markets and investors are concerned about your company.
We are going through an evolution, and there will be bumps on the road, but we are moving in the right direction.
And will that mean you will be less aggressive on pricing? You're going to get, and do you think it's taken a little while longer than you would have anticipated for the turnaround to happen?
These are decisions that have to be made, and some will be right, some will be wrong, but we are moving in the right direction. That's the answer I have.
S.Gopalakrishnan, you're going to have a very busy time in New Delhi over the next few months. We wish you all the very best, and we hope that the industry does put its point across to the government and the government does act on it. Thank you very much for talking to us. Thanks a lot.